What happens when a rising Congresswoman confronts a former Attorney General and calls out racial bias? On live television, the room braced for a meltdown. But instead of exploding, Pam Bondi opened a binder and made the whole chamber go silent. Disclaimer: this is a fictional story. While inspired by real themes and public discourse, all characters, events, and dialogue are purely imagined for dramatic and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is entirely coincidental. The hearing chamber was quiet in that particular way only government buildings can be. Sterile, methodical, slightly bored. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The marble echoed with every footstep. Staffers whispered behind stacks of legal pads, occasionally glancing up at the digital clock ticking toward noon. This wasn't supposed to be anything remarkable, just another oversight session, another line item on the schedule, the kind of hearing that no one stays awake for, and few even attend unless required. A handful of journalists sat lazily in the back row, scrolling through email or sipping lukewarm coffee, expecting a slow, procedural exchange that wouldn't even make the news crawl. Pam Bondi sat at the witness table, composed like someone who had done this 100 times. And she had. Her posture was immaculate, her navy blazer perfectly tailored, her fingers gently laced together on the polished desk. Her expression was neutral but not detached. She had the face of someone who knew the game, who had learned to navigate power not by defiance, but by never giving anyone enough emotion to grab onto. She glanced once at her notes, then calmly surveyed the dais, making eye contact without lingering. This was familiar terrain to her. She wasn't nervous. If anything, she looked slightly bored. Across the room sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, younger, sharper. Her suit was less expensive, but her focus was diamond cut. She didn't fidget or shuffle her papers. She just waited. Her microphone was already positioned, but she reached out and adjusted it anyway, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't about the mic. It was about time, about rhythm, about choosing her moment. Her eyes didn't scan the room. They locked onto Bondi the entire time, calm, unreadable, but absolutely unshakable. Crockett wasn't here to listen. She was here to strike, not with outrage or theatrics, but with calculation. The chairperson cleared his throat and began with the usual procedural language. It didn't matter. Everyone had already sensed the shift in the room. You could feel it. The kind of tension that doesn't show up on the schedule, but somehow takes over the air. A young staffer in the back blinked and leaned forward, sensing something but not sure what. Even the stenographer paused briefly before typing the next line. And then Crockett spoke. "I'm not accusing you of overt racism, Miss Bondi." Her voice was calm, measured, intimate in a way that made the chamber suddenly too quiet. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The pause after her words was louder than anything else. Her gaze never moved. Her voice didn't waver, but the words hung in the air like a smoke alarm no one could shut off. A few heads turned. Phones stopped recording background notes and started capturing video. I'm asking if you've ever considered that your definition of justice only ever seemed to serve one kind of defendant. This time, the words hit harder, because they weren't rhetorical. They weren't just political theatre. They were surgical. Bondi didn't flinch, but she didn't respond either. Her face held still, but something changed behind the eyes. She was listening now, really listening. The chair leaned forward a fraction, a subtle cue that this was no longer procedural. This was personal. The room didn't explode. It constricted. No one interrupted. No one called for decorum. Because everyone, whether they wanted to admit it or not, wanted to see where this was going. Even Bondi. Especially Bondi. And in that silence, a strange kind of understanding emerged between them. This wasn't just about policy, it wasn't even just about race, it was about reckoning. About two women, shaped by different histories and truths, about to test which one would hold in the heat. And so they sat there, eyes locked. Crockett ready, Bondi unreadable. The fuse had been lit and the chamber didn't even realize it was holding its breath. What had started as routine was now something else entirely. This wasn't a hearing. It was the beginning of a confrontation, one where words would not be shouted, but whispered, measured, documented. And yet, they would hit harder than any gavel. The silence after Crockett's opening words wasn't just awkward, it was strategic. She let it linger, not out of hesitation, but to give the weight of her statement room to breathe. Bondi didn't respond. She sat motionless but alert. Her breathing was calm, almost studied, like someone who had practiced staying still under fire. But Crockett hadn't come just to start a conversation. She had come to document a legacy, and now she was ready to begin. Without breaking eye contact, Crockett reached to her side and lifted a manila folder, bulging, worn at the corners, marked with handwritten tabs. She placed it gently on the table before her, flipping it open with a kind of reverence. Inside were not slogans, not theories, but records. Real names, real outcomes, court transcripts, sentencing memos, prosecutorial discretion logs, the kind of paper trail most people don't see until it's too late. Then her tone shifted. Still calm, but firmer now, laced with quiet rage that had been simmering beneath the surface. "I've reviewed your office's public case history, Miss Bondi," she said, her voice cutting through the room with surgical precision. "And here's what I found. Over the course of your tenure, in jurisdiction after jurisdiction, young black men received the maximum penalty available under the law. But young white men, many of them with similar charges, similar records, were sent to diversion programs, counseling, probation." She let the words sink in, then slid a few pages across the desk toward the clerk. "These aren't isolated," she continued. "They're patterns. Documented, repeated. And these," she said, tapping the folder, "these are just the public ones." A quiet gasp came from the back of the room. One of the reporters finally looked up, eyes narrowed, pen now racing. Crockett didn't pause. She flipped to another section of the folder and read off 3 names, 3 case numbers, 3 nearly identical charges, and 3 vastly different outcomes. In each case, the black defendant was sentenced to prison. In each white counterpart's case, leniency. The kind you only get when the system knows how to smile at you. Bondi still hadn't moved. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She had trained herself to listen like stone. But everyone watching could feel the air get heavier. Then came the question, not shouted, but measured like a judge handing down a verdict. "Did you ever stop to question the pattern?" It wasn't rhetorical. It was a scalpel. Crockett leaned forward slightly, not to intimidate, but to underscore her presence. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes burned with something deeper than outrage. Exhaustion, generational memory, personal truth. "Because patterns don't lie," she said. "They're not opinions. They're reflections. And this one says something loud, that justice, in your office, didn't wear a blindfold. It wore a filter." Bondi's fingers shifted slightly, just once, barely perceptible. Her jaw flexed, but still she said nothing. And that's when Crockett struck again, more pointed now. "If you knew, why didn't you stop it? And if you didn't know, then what exactly were you overseeing?" The power dynamic trembled, not with volume, but with weight. The balance was shifting, not because someone yelled, but because someone dug deeper than anyone expected. The chair remained silent. The staffers were frozen. The audience, watching from across the nation, didn't yet realize it. But they weren't witnessing a hearing anymore. They were witnessing a trial without a bench. And only one of these women had brought a binder of receipts. There are moments in political hearings when everyone expects heat, anger, pushback, spin. Moments when the accused snaps, fires back, rattles papers, points fingers. But Pam Bondi did none of that. She waited. Hands still folded, eyes steady. She didn't react. Not in the way the room anticipated. She sat in complete, unnerving silence. That silence stretched. Not passive, not defeated, but calculated. The kind of silence that's been practiced, refined, weaponized not for show, but for control. Her breathing remained even, her gaze forward, unshaken. Cameras zoomed in, hoping for a twitch, a frown, a crack in the facade. Nothing came. She was either crumbling beneath the surface, or she was planning something. Finally, she spoke. Just 5 words. "I followed the law," she said. No emphasis, no apology, just law. Cold, clean, absolute. That should have been a defense. A statement of professionalism. But in the tension that Crockett had built, it landed with a hollow thud. The words didn't fill the silence. They exposed it. Crockett didn't even reply. She didn't need to. She simply leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and let the silence do what words couldn't. The room sat in that vacuum, hanging on a single thought. If following the law led to unequal outcomes, then what does that say about the law? And the person who enforced it? Bondi seemed to know what everyone was thinking. That's why, when she broke the silence again, it wasn't with more defense. It was with something far riskier. She turned, not dramatically but deliberately, to face Crockett and asked, "Congresswoman, do you believe my entire career was shaped by racism?" It wasn't a trick. It wasn't rhetorical. It was precise, sharpened, designed to do what most responses in this room could never do: reclaim the frame. Crockett didn't answer, not because she didn't know what she believed, but because she realized the weight of the question. It wasn't just about Bondi anymore. It was about the system, about legacy, about the danger of boiling injustice down to a single word, and what that word could do to decades of public service, even flawed, imperfect, institutional service. The silence that followed wasn't strategic this time. It was human, heavy, complex. Everyone in the chamber felt it, not as a climax, but as a pivot. Because now, this wasn't about whether Bondi had been unfair. It was about what fairness meant when viewed through different lived experiences. It wasn't a takedown anymore. It was a reckoning, with power, with perception, with history. 2 women, 1 chamber, 1 truth, seen from 2 ends of a fault line, and the ground beneath them had just begun to shift. The silence after Bondi's question hovered in the air, thick and loaded. Crockett, until now the firebrand at the center of the storm, didn't reply. She didn't need to. She was processing, calculating. Because somewhere deep in the rhythm of this exchange, the tempo had changed. And that's when Pam Bondi moved. Not fast, not forcefully, just deliberately. She reached down beside her chair and brought up a black binder, sleek, professional, thick with documentation. She didn't wave it, she didn't present it like a prop for cable news. She simply opened it, turned to the clerk, handed it over. There was no preamble, no speech, just a quiet sentence. Bias training, internal reviews, vacated sentences, diversion program audits, civil rights attorney recommendations. Then she looked back at Crockett, her voice steady, but this time, it carried something different. Not defensiveness, not smugness, conviction. "If racism defined me," she said slowly, "I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be hiding. But I came. With receipts." The sentence didn't echo. It landed like a gavel without a sound. The clerk took the binder and began flipping pages, slowly at first, then faster. Something had changed. Something was inside those pages that no one had expected. Charts reform memos, case re-evaluations, meeting transcripts with civil rights organizations, names, dates, proof. A quiet gasp rippled across the chamber. Not theatrical, not exaggerated, just real. The kind that comes when people realize they've only seen half the story. Bondi didn't speak again. She didn't need to. For the first time since the confrontation began, Crockett didn't speak either. Not because she was cornered, not because she was wrong, but because what she had walked into expecting, a wall of denial, hadn't appeared. Instead, Bondi had done something far more disarming. She had shown her homework, and in a world used to evasions, that alone was enough to make the room lean forward. The binder wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating in its own way. Because while Crockett had brought fire, Bondi had brought paper. Quiet, objective, damning paper. The kind that doesn't trend in headlines but rewrites legacies behind closed doors. The cameras caught it. The audience felt it. The power dynamic didn't collapse. It flipped. Because in that moment, the story stopped being about who yelled first. It became about who was still standing after the fire had passed, and who brought facts to the ashes. At first, the clip spread like any other political showdown. Spliced, edited, and set to dramatic music, it was Crockett's voice that took center stage. The moment she said, "Your justice only served one kind of defendant," was everywhere, on X, TikTok, Reels, headlines. Left-leaning commentators rushed in with praise. Finally, someone said it. Hashtags like #JusticeOnTrial and #Crockett Faces Bondi began trending by mid-afternoon. Activist accounts reposted the moment with graphics. Edits appeared with swelling orchestral music behind Crockett's opening monologue. People clapped virtually, digitally, emotionally. But something strange happened by nightfall. A second wave of content began to rise. Not fiery, not loud, but still surging. This time, it was Bondi's calm reply. Not her expression, not her defense, her binder. Screenshots of her passing it to the clerk lit up feeds with captions like, "She brought facts." One clip showed Bondi saying, "If racism defined me, I'd be hiding, but I came," with receipts. That clip didn't trend because it was explosive. It trended because it was controlled. Comments flooded in from unexpected corners. "She didn't yell. She brought data Crockett made me feel. Bondi made me think. Finally, someone answered a serious accusation without turning it into a circus." Such receipts matter started trending by midnight. Not as a meme, but as a standard. A call for real evidence in the age of performance politics. And it wasn't just conservatives sharing it. Independents, teachers, even progressive legal scholars reposted the full exchange. Not the 30-second snippets, but the full hearing. The slow, measured, uncomfortable truth of it. By the next morning, classrooms across the country were showing the clip. In a civics class at a Florida high school, a teacher paused the video and asked, "Which part informed your view? Which part triggered your emotions?" A 17-year-old in the back raised her hand and said quietly, "Crockett made me feel something, but Bondi made me think in community centers and barbershops, in quiet group chats and college debate clubs, in living rooms where politics had always been too loud to talk about." People weren't just watching, they were re-watching. Because this wasn't about who won the exchange anymore. It was about what had just been modeled. Two opposing truths, spoken without screaming, colliding under pressure, and somehow leaving behind something human. The confrontation had escaped party lines. It had become something else, a mirror. Days passed. The internet had moved on, mostly. New headlines came and went. New viral clips replaced the confrontation in the public spotlight. But something about this one refused to fade completely. People kept returning to it, watching it in full, analyzing not just the words, but the silences, the eyes, the pauses. And during those days, Jasmine Crockett remained silent. No interviews, no follow-up tweets, no viral rebuttal or press circuit. Just silence. And then, on the 5th day, something unexpected appeared. Not in a press release, not in a headline, but on her personal website. A handwritten letter, photographed, unedited. The kind of thing rarely seen from public figures. Personal, vulnerable, human. It began simply. "What I said to Miss Bondi came from a real place. The ink curved slightly at the edges. Not polished, not rehearsed, just real. But not every uncomfortable truth belongs in confrontation." She didn't walk anything back. She didn't recant the substance of her accusation. But the tone, the delivery, the moment, she acknowledged them with the kind of honesty that hits harder than any rebuttal ever could. She admitted that while the fire had been justified, the format had not always served the message. She recognized the moment had taken on a life of its own, and so had she. Then came the sentence that no one expected. I rewatched the full hearing, and I have to admit, she didn't dodge. She stood her ground, and that deserves to be recognized. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't retreat. It was growth, the kind the public rarely gets to see, especially in politics, especially between two women on opposite ends of a power exchange. Bondi didn't respond right away. No press conference, no headline victory lap, just another pause. And then, quietly, in a short interview with a local radio affiliate, she offered a simple answer. I think the Congresswoman is passionate. And I respect that she came back with thought, not fire. No spin, no shade. Just mutual respect, hard-earned, quietly exchanged. And just like that, what could have turned into a year-long partisan feud became something else entirely. A moment of restraint, of evolution, of strength, not in shouting, but in standing still. In a time where every disagreement is designed to divide, this chapter didn't escalate. It closed a loop. Not perfectly, but humanly. In the days that followed, the political machine tried to do what it always does, assign sides. Headlines circled like hawks, looking to name a victor. Editorials debated whether Bondi had won the moment or if Crockett had exposed something bigger. Commentators tried to frame it through the lens of party lines, identity politics, generational divide. But no one frame held. Because the public, those watching at home, on subways, in classrooms, in late-night silence, felt something else entirely. Pam Bondi didn't walk away from that hearing victorious. She walked away unshaken. Not because she deflected, but because she had been prepared. She didn't twist the narrative. She didn't deny hard questions. She simply stood in the heat and said, here's what I did. Here's what I learned. Here's the record on Crockett. She wasn't praised for being the loudest voice in the room. She was respected for doing something harder, listening after the fact. Not walking back her truth, but widening it, taking a breath. Showing the country that conviction and reflection aren't opposites. They're chapters. What emerged wasn't a clean narrative. It was a mirror for the system, for the media, for everyone who's ever rushed to judgment before reading the binder. The clip lived on, not in partisan channels, but in spaces rarely touched by political drama. In college ethics seminars, in professional development workshops, in family group chats where politics is usually off limits. It sparked a conversation that had little to do with race or law or even history, and everything to do with tone, with truth, with what it means to show up ready to argue and walk away willing to rethink. In that, the story found its legacy. Not in the moment Crockett struck, not in the moment Bondi answered, but in the pause they left behind. Because in a time where public discourse is measured in volume and outrage, two women, fierce, flawed, and unflinching, had done something rare. They had made space, space to breathe, space to think, space to change. As the screen fades to black, the final image holds. The black binder resting on the polished desk, slightly open. A quiet symbol, nothing loud, nothing flashy. Just the truth waiting to be read. Text appears. Truth doesn't shout. It stays standing. Fade out.